Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everybody, it's William Harris here. I am the founder and CEO of Element and the host of this podcast where I feature experts in the D2C industry sharing strategies on how to scale your business and achieve your goals. The guest that I have with me today is Katharine McKee, although I found out just a couple of minutes ago, she also goes by Katie. That's what she has down here because we didn't have enough characters to fit everything in that line. Katharine McKee founded Morphology Consulting, a digital commerce consultancy that creates long-term profitable growth for their clients by helping them understand and adhere to algorithmic systems online. After a 15-year career building out digital commerce capability for companies in pillars such as CPG, luxury, beauty, and apparel. She's a Forbes Next 1000 honoree and 15-year veteran in digital commerce. Katharine is a leader in e-commerce and an expert on systems who focuses on building clean processes and organizations. To date, Katharine has overhauled the digital go-to-market for more than 50 brands, including Fortune 500s such as Coty, Luxottica, and IPG Media brands, and has sustainably increased clients' revenue up to 600% year over year. Katharine, excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. And I was thinking about, okay, so I think we originally connected through a LinkedIn group that Alex Greenfield founder of No Best Practices, both invited us to, right?
Yeah. She's great.
She is great. There's a lot of smart e-commerce people in there and thankful to be part of that crew.
Yeah. Same. It's a good group.
It is. Before we get into the good stuff here, I do want to make sure that I call out that this episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million, and we were ranked as the 12th fastest growing agency in the world by Adweek. That said, enough of the boring stuff, on to the good stuff. Katharine, why did you found Morphology Consulting? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, good question. My background was always in e-commerce, so I guess, thank God that took off. Thanks for the internet. But I was the head of e-com at a bunch of different shops, and I kept running into the same problems. And single brands, 40 brands in a group, whatever it was the same problem over and over and over again. And I kept kind of finding as I would switch categories or switch companies that we were just starting at point zero again. And as I switched companies, I was switching categories. And what was happening is that I would sort of go back and do like light consulting projects with previous clients or previous jobs, employers, I guess I should say. And it just sort of was a lot more appealing to me than playing kind of the corporate game. I think there's an element in large companies of you shift away from being a doer at a certain point. Like different corporate levels have different skill sets in them. And mine is not being politically savvy. So
sure.
Consulting seemed like a good fit. Like, I will keep making you money fixing the broken stuff and you guys can all go to dinner together.
Just do it in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
What is it about this though that you're passionate about? Like, where does the passion come from?
That's a good question. I think partially the autism. I'm autistic, and order and I guess really order is super important to me. And I'm the style I have is sort of like fractal pattern matching, which means that the more that I run across bad websites that have sort of consistent bad programs, the crazier I personally get. I'm like, none of this needs to be happening. And I think when you're in a space too, the flip side of it is that people's businesses are an emotional minefield for them. And there's a lot of discomfort and stress and emotional, maybe dysregulation in the space. And a lot of it doesn't need to be there. So the way that we've always focused on it is setting up fundamentals to be aligned to the system that you're in. And I find that people aren't aligned to the system that they're trying to use. And that creates this very tense adversarial relationship. And it doesn't need to be there. And I personally like to know the correct answer to things. And I always want to kind of share with other people that if you don't know that 3 + 4 is 7 and you think it's 9 and it keeps ruining your life because it's not actually 9, wouldn't it be helpful if someone was like, hey man, it's 7, which is sort of where I come from.
One of the things that I like about this is because I love math. When you said fractals, I don't know if you saw my eyes get big. I was like, ooh, yes, let's get into that. But we won't go too deep into that for everybody else's sake. But just the idea of systems kind of being frustrating when they're not done well. And even like you said, I like the idea where you're like from client to client to client to client, it's the same thing oftentimes. It's like it's the same problems. This is very tangential, but it's just I'm ADHD, so not on the autism, but you'll see that I have an ADHD style. Going to check into a game for my daughter, and I will say this for volleyball game. And speaking of systems that just are broken, you go to check in, and I don't know if you've been this. When I was young, we'd go to a game, and you would actually just check in. You'd pay with cash, and that was fine. And I'm not like a cash person, just so we're clear on that. I definitely am, very digital. I'm involved in crypto and NFTs, but now it's like you get there and they're like, oh, you have to download this app. Like we don't actually take it. You have to download this app. So you download the app, you wait for that. Then they're like, okay, well then you got to log in, get your team. Then once you get your team, then you can pay for the ticket. Then you have to wait for it to like send you an email confirmation of it. And then you can go into the game. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have taken something that should be so simple. We've made it so complex. And this was just a breakdown in process. And I can see where those breakdown in processes can be very frustrating. And so I guess my question to you is, as you go through this and you see that there are certain patterns from business to business, what are those broken processes or patterns that you're seeing across businesses that just irritate you?
Yeah, very good question. I think also maddening, by the way. Having to use an app for everything where you're like, can't I just swipe my ticket is mind blowing. Like, guys, stop doing that. I think the thing that I run into with a lot of brands is a mindset problem. Like I think this is what it is. Like just sort of foundationally, if you are used to being in a low trust environment and you are presented with a high trust tool, that is not going to mesh very well. So I find a lot of brands spend all of their time or most of their time trying to find like a hack or a trick or like a way to get around it. And they're constantly like, the door says push on it, just push it. Like that's actually the fastest way to do it. Like pulling it's not going to work, smashing it's not going to work. Like getting people around you, calling someone, like you could just push it. And I really think that's where people get stuck because there's a lot talked about around like different tactics or different ideas or different sort of ways to like beat the machine. And from the bottom of my heart, you are not smarter than the machine. And it's very weird to want to fight it. Like the machine's existence, and this is the mindset part, the machine's existence is to make it easier. Like Google's not out to get you. Amazon's not out to get you. Facebook's not out. None of these things are out to get you. Yeah. They're difficult to use when you don't follow the directions, but like that's an internal locus of control, right? Like they're not out to get you, but it's really maddening. I've done this myself a million times trying to pull open a push door. And like, let me tell you, it's embarrassing. It's frustrating. It's emotionally bad for me, but like the door doesn't care. The door has no skin in the game of me getting inside. And so taking the control back and sort of being like, I can manage this. This is up to me to figure it out, I think is really the foundational thing that we do with all of our customers, which is like, don't be mad at it because it doesn't care about you. So that's not going to be productive. The second part is like, could we made a mistake somewhere? Is there a way to do this more efficiently, correctly within the system? And 100% of the time, yes, that's what the problem is.
I appreciate that you called out that, Google's not against you. And I think sometimes, we do feel like it's easy to pick on Google or Facebook or TikTok and say that, this ads are against us and they're trying to work out against us. But the reality is they want you to be successful because that's what makes you spend more money with them. And so like they absolutely are aligned with you on that. Now it can feel like there's a misalignment because their goal is to get you to spend money without seeing a return. And I know that's how people could feel. And there are times where that might be what happens. And some of the recommendations that come through are absolutely wild. And you're like, yeah, no, don't do that. That's not good for your business. But their ultimate goal is for the ads platform to align with your business goals. And then we're seeing this push more and more, which is a really good thing. What are some examples that you've found where people feel like maybe Google is working against them when in reality, we just need to maybe shift how we're thinking about things?
Yeah, fair. And I actually want to pause there, which is that Google's goal is not to get you to spend more money. And that is where people get crazy. And Google's goal is not selling you ads. It never was. It's a data company. It's that type of thing where people are like, I only use it for ads. So my perception of this is that the ads part is what matters. It's not. And Google didn't start with selling ads. Google is a data platform built to help people, customers, so like not the brand, but customers, get the right answer. They added ads because brands refused to go to market cleanly. And people were like, hey, can I pay to jump ahead of the line? Instead of building a website that indexes well, that you, the search engine, can read, and you're like, oh, yes, this is an ad agency that has won this many awards, and Element is the one that you want. Instead of doing that, brands were like, can I just pay you money instead? Sure. So if you asked for graft, you can't be mad that you're paying it. But also Google doesn't care, right? Like Google is not doing any of this to you. And so when they make recommendations, most of them are things that are like, well, if you've chosen to go this route, the next step would be buying more ads. You have clearly decided you're not going to fix your website. That is the correct answer, but it's not my job to tell you that. It's your job to know that. And I think Amazon is in a similar place too, which is both Google and Amazon are not your partner in anything. They're a tool. Yeah. All of them assume that you are the business owner and that you are good at business. If you have chosen to make a website that is 5 JPEGs in a folder and not an indexable entity, you must have had a reason. Sure. It's not Google's job to tell you that. So if you're like, hey, Google, now I want to buy my traffic, I want to give you money for ads, you picked that. And I think there's this fundamental, like you can't be mad at a hammer if you didn't use it to hammer things. The hammer doesn't have any stake in this game. And the hardware store assumed that you had a purpose for it. What that purpose is was your decision. So no one's kind of stopping you in the middle. And I guess other than us being like, hey guys, that's not how it works. So yeah, you could buy infinity ads. You can do conquesting, which is insane. You can buy all the keywords in the world. You can bid crazy amounts of money. They're not going to stop you because you have autonomy. You are welcome to do, it's not a good idea, but like you're welcome to do it. And I think where we get stuck is that when we've created a relationship that's like that, and that's not a healthy one, we then recognize it's not a healthy relationship, but like you sort of need to stay your part in it as well, which is that wouldn't be happening had you made other changes earlier or made, changes later. But the point is not that Google is out here trying to like scam you for extra ad dollars. It's that they're a high trust entity. They're giving you all this information, assuming that you're going to do good stuff with it. Yeah. If you don't, or if you perceive that as, or if you don't do anything with it, or if you perceive it as unfair, or you are used to a low trust environment where we're both adversarial and we both get the game that we're playing and we both are sort of like, retail's like this, where everyone's sort of like squabbling with each other. If you approach a high trust environment with a low trust mentality, it's just going to move away from you. So like you can conquest all you want. That's insane. Like it's weird to have catfishing be your like marketing campaign, but like live your life. I'm not going to stop you. Do what you got to do if you're Google. And I think when we talk to brands and I say things like this, the brands are sort of like, wait, what? Wouldn't Google have stopped us? And you're like, why? You're a grown adult. You asked for this thing. If you're allergic to fish and you buy sushi, like that seems like a bad idea, but it's not the restaurant's fault,
Yeah. So you could kind of, almost like take care of it in one fell swoop. And I think the idea behind it would be, what about, you talked about control here in this. It's like you have the control of this. And there's a lot of things I know that you and I have talked about where it's like, what are the things that you have control over? So what are some of the things that we have control over that we act like we don't have control over, but as brands and as merchants that we should be taking control?
Yeah, fair. I think the big one is traffic. I think the one where people feel like they have to buy traffic is what's hurting them. You don't. 2% of clicks go to ads. 2%. So 98% of clicks is going to organic. That's 100% within your control. And part of the control are things where, there's stopgaps along the way that like, it's very easy to build a beautiful website that doesn't index. It's incredibly easy. And a lot of the information that you're given currently in the space is how to make a beautiful website, and none of them index. And I think that's an easy one, like check the sizes of your images. Are they what's slowing your load time down? Like site speed's an easy thing to fix. Having backlinks as a strategy instead of authority as a strategy. Backlinks are a proxy for information. They're like you telling the cop that I have a driver's license instead of me having the driver's license. You can also just put the information on the website so that Google or whoever people can read it. Like I think we talked a little bit about the grandma test I make my clients do, which is that part of building your website is that if your grandmother, can your grandmother use it? Is she going to get it? Right. Is she going to know where she is and what she's doing and be able to check out quickly? And for most beautiful websites, the answer is no. And you're like, if your grandma can't do it, the search engine can't either. But thankfully, all of that's within your control. All of those are things that you can readjust to give good information and have a user experience that's clear and have a site that loads quickly and has a high authority score. Like all of that is maybe simple, not easy is the way to put it.
Sure. Well, okay, yeah. Simple, not easy. It reminds me of like complex versus complicated. It's a really good debate between like the two of those, right? And like a lot of times we interchange them, but they mean very different things.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of, and we see this on the ad side too, where don't make your customer's job harder than it needs to be.
Right.
And if you were to translate this into, let's say, a retail location, it's the idea of going out there and intentionally not putting a sign up on the outside of your door, not putting a street sign out there, locking the front door so they have to come in the back door, right? And it's like you've literally just made it as complicated as possible to try to get customers in through your door. Whereas if you actually just do these basic things that have been established as what needs to be done, these processes, then it's going to work. And to your point, where it's like, hey, actually just make sure your feed is clean. I can't tell you how many times we come into a feed that is absolute garbage. And you're like, if you actually just have your feed clean, oh, your pixel's not tracking. It's triple tracking. It's whatever. Yeah. Okay. These things are simple things that can be fixed that make a massive difference in let's just say, your customers' ability to find your store and find what's relevant, as well as Google or Facebook's or TikTok's or whomever, whatever other ad platform you're looking at, their ability to understand what's going on this page as well.
For sure. And I think probably a third part, because we work with a lot of agencies, and brands will bring us in a lot to audit agencies that the brands don't trust. And it like keeps circling back to that. Like I've maybe in my entire career found like 2 agencies that were actively doing bad things. The rest of the time is like, I don't know, you had an agency buy you a bunch of ads for product that's not in stock, for a region where you don't ship your product, for a website that will not load, a website that has 19 pop-ups on it. Like, the ads didn't work. That is correct.
Yep.
But it's not that they bought crazy ads. It's not that the strategy is bad. It's that the environment you drove people to stinks. And that's not the agency's job. That's your job.
Yeah. And I won't let agencies off the hook on that. And I appreciate that you're kind about that. I will say that I think that to a point that is some of the agency's job, they should be aware of what they're doing, what they're advertising. If you're advertising products that are out of stock as an agency, you better catch that and fix that and make sure that you're not doing it. I appreciate that you did say that it was, not necessarily out of, some kind of like a sabotage the brand. It was maybe just like a carelessness or whatever. And I think you'll appreciate this, because we have a section on our homepage that says, we promise to make mistakes. That sounds really wild to say that. And what I say though is I said, but seriously, hear us out. If we make 0 mistakes, then we probably aren't moving fast enough, or we aren't making big enough changes. If your goal is to grow fast, mistakes are inevitable. And then I go on, I said, any agency that says otherwise is either lying to you or too incompetent to realize they've even made the mistake in the first place. And I go on, obviously our goal is to reduce mistakes as much as possible. But the idea behind this here, it was through processes. And so there's a lot that we do from that perspective. But the idea behind this is exactly kind of what you were saying, where if you are making the types of mistakes where you're advertising products that are out of stock, you just have a bad process problem. That's a mistake that should be avoided. But if you are making a mistake because of, let's just say, you're testing out something that's completely untried and you have no clue if this is going to do better or not, and there's no research out there about this at all, there are going to be mistakes that are made for that. That's a good mistake, because you're saying we're testing, we're validating, we're trying new things, we're pioneering. Those are okay. Mistakes, though, for things that are breakdowns of process, those are inexcusable, and you should be able to work towards figuring out how to make sure that your feed is clean, etc.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly agreed. I will also say, though, that the point of a test is to see if it's a yes, no. That's not a mistake if it's a no. Like, you're checking it to check it. Like, it's data. Which, yes, obviously you should be clear with the brand, and they should understand that like some things will work, some things won't. But like, I do think that's different from, we didn't read the brief and we put something crazy up and it sucks. Like, okay, there's probably like a check and balance we skipped here.
What are the other top 3, let's say 2 or 3 processes that you see that brands are just failing to do well, that you're like, please look at this and fix this?
The first one really is the site. The first one is sites that are beautiful disasters. Like, I see a lot of really stunning websites that are only images, and it's the biggest one. It impacts everything. It is a huge underpinning of our work. But there are a lot of things where like those images are enormous, or you put up like movement files, which are enormous and they take forever to load, and human eyes don't like them. There's a lot of, I think that ties into this. the idea that you have to like strike while the iron's hot and like jump on the cool thing. And so I see a lot of brands really sort of like
shiny object,
chasing that when you're like shiny object. And also like, did you stop and think about this?
Yeah.
Like, did you need lasers for your like toothpaste company? Do you think they want that? Right. Do you think Mother's Day is the right time to sell like tire irons? Like, have we like thought through like what this is? So I would say it's sort of two-pronged. One is having a website that does not adhere to any algorithmic structure. That's a really big one, which is like, you can't put any size image up. You shouldn't start your navigation with the word shop unless you sell shops, which you probably don't. But like, that's not directional. What do you do? Like, tell me what you do and put information. And the other part that I think is sort of in tandem to that is like, do you know what your customers want? And I'm going to tell you, a lot of brands do not. A lot of brands are smart people who had a cool idea, and a lot of times in D2C, like they were patient zero, they had a problem. And so they innovated this cool thing and they solved the problem. And that is wonderful. That is not to knock any of that. It's that you are probably not indicative of your entire customer market. Right. And almost always you aren't your actual market. Like, it solved your thing, but like the actual market use of this is like over here. And I find that brands get really dug in, D2C brands mostly, get really dug in on like, but I'm cool. So like my selling point is that I'm cool. And you're like, it's not. First of all, no one has ever Googled I'm cool, so you're never going to get any traffic. Second is, when they get there, me or my grandmother, why would I want this?
Yeah.
Why would I care? And it's never beautiful imagery. That has never sold anyone on anything, literally. You need to tell me the specs of the car so I know if it's a good idea. You need to tell me if the shampoo is for curly hair or not. Because if you don't, and you're like, hey, look at this beautiful packaging, like, psyched for you, man. That package looks cool, but I'm not going to buy it. And I think brands really get stuck there on like, well, what's the next hacky, attention-seeking, thumb scroll stopping thing I can do? And you're like, that's not what the problem is. The problem is that your website's unusable and that you're talking to yourself. So like, yes, you and your brand director think it looks awesome and you don't care that it takes 37 seconds to load, but your customers do.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. I mean, we're impatient. And I think that we're hopefully on the same page on this. Hopefully I don't open up a big can of worms, but site speed is one of those interesting things. I've seen where there are some people who don't care at all about their site speed. And you're like, this is a horribly loading page. And others who care way too much, where, they're chasing this, nth percent change that is just this minuscule change that the cost no longer rewards that. And I'll often see, especially in the e-commerce side, where there are brands who will say, well, we're not loading as fast as, XYZ site. Well, that's a static HTML website. You could put up a static HTML website for an e-commerce brand, but you're not going to convert customers that way either. There is an element of a lot of, let's just say, very unique dynamic stuff, and that takes some time to load, and it's a little bit more understood. And so making sure that people compare themselves from a site speed perspective to other relevant, similar things within their category or their niche. And so, just because you get a site speed that scores an F on, some site page, let's just say, Google's site page speed score or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad. Compare that to with everybody else in your niche. Are you within the range of what's good in that particular area? Okay, fine. If you're not, then that's where you need to start digging in. Would you agree with that?
No. So
okay.
We might need to fight about it. I do agree with you that there are diminishing returns. I do agree with you that trying to get like teeny increments is a giant waste of time. If you're getting an F on something, you just blew off 75% of your traffic, which is probably not the direction you want to go in revenue-wise. And I will say that I am team never compare. Stop looking at your competition. They're not smarter than you, and you're all making the same terrible decision. Which truthfully, maybe don't stop doing that, because that's what keeps me in business. But I spend a lot of time being like, yeah, it doesn't matter what the brand you aspirationally want to be like did. Like, you're a jewelry brand, but you think David Yurman is cool. David Yurman's website is not good. But David Yurman is a legacy brand. Their website doesn't need to be good. People are buying those bracelets anywhere they can. Their website does not matter. What happens, particularly I think in D2C, is, again, like shiny object. You are layering your Shopify site, which is already going to load incredibly slowly, with a million different apps that you absolutely do not need. You shouldn't have any pop-ups. You shouldn't have any banners. You shouldn't have any of those ticker tape things on the top. You don't need a chatbot unless you're like a doctor. You don't need any of these things. And I think people get stuck being like, well, but my cohort did it. And you're like, yeah, send me their numbers, because I'm going to have them pay me money too to fix these. Like none of that is good for your site. So I would say very firmly, stay away from any kind of comparison with people in your cohort, because sticking to benchmarking and sticking to competitive set will keep you mediocre. It will keep you terrible. The whole idea that like every single customer hated this, we got an F on our site speed, which sucks, but everyone else sucks together. Like being tied for last is not the score you want.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I said F. I should have said like, let's say B- or something along those lines. Maybe I went a bit drastic. Just the idea that it's like, well, sometimes I've seen in situations where the only way to significantly improve the site speed from where you're at now is get rid of everything that's dynamic on your website and turn it into a static website. And it's like, look, that's bad for e-commerce from a certain perspective, where it's like, as an e-commerce brand, you actually do need to show some kind of dynamic stuff where it's like, some products absolutely are better in like a 360 view, where you're like, I kind of need to see like, a few different things. There are some moments where you're like, that does help people move along. But I do agree with what you're saying. A lot of this is overkill, and NF is being maybe wrong score.
Fair. I would argue against B- too, but I will say that I appreciate what you're saying. And I think some of it is in deployment. Sure. So people who are like, yeah, my product should be in a 360 spin. Okay, but not on the homepage. And the homepage is what's setting your site speed score. If you made that way smaller and you drove it all the way down to the size it's supposed to be and you put it on a PDP, it wouldn't impact your site score, or it would nominally impact your site score. So I think there's an element of like, are we using the right tools in the right place? And also, there are like 3 products on earth that really need a 360. So like, if you're like spinning the pill bottle, like, guys, come on. There's
a lot of novelty being used for AI and AR and, all types of things that you're like, this does, I didn't need to see that shirt in augmented reality. That didn't change my understanding of that shirt at all. Whereas, Wayfair's use of tool. AR to be able to see like, this couch in my office to see whether or not do I like the way that's actually really nice, because I don't want to ship that couch here unless it's the really going to fit and like that. So there are novel uses to it that are just inappropriate, and then there are some good ways to use it too.
Yeah, agreed. And I think like to your point, like use the one that's good for you. Don't use all of them.
Yeah. What about an example of, let's say, a site that you feel has done a really great job? This could be site speed. It doesn't have to be site speed, but you're just saying, I feel like this brand has done a great job of nailing down these core processes that are in your control.
Everybody asks me that. I don't have a good one. And when I work with clients, I tend to like mock them for them. I will tell you that a perfect site is probably not what a brand is going to be excited about. So like no images.
Sure.
Images don't actually do anything. And I know that all the brand people are getting real worked up. They don't do anything. Yeah. And I've tested sites where
right? Yeah.
I know people are going to freak out. But every time I've tested it, I've been like, you could take all of this down and it will not impact people buying things. Now, not 0 images ever if you have a product. Like if you sell jewelry, you are going to need to like show a picture of it at some point.
Sure.
But your website should not be a cajillion images. Most websites should really be on like the Amazon function. And I mean the old Amazon function. Write it out and tell me what it is. Because when people are shopping, what they want is information, and brands are like, oh, but I can make a beautiful version of showing you the thing that you need. And you're like, I don't know what that white lace shirt on a white background, to give a bad example, is going to look like on me. I don't know how long it is. I don't know how it'll fit. I also can't tell where the shirt ends and the background starts. Like most imagery without context is not helpful at all. Context is the entire journey, and images are like a nice icing sometimes. Obviously, brands are probably like screaming at this point. So like, of course you can keep your images and there's a happy medium.
Yeah.
The happy medium just isn't perfect. Like closer to perfect is more data. So you want to err on the side of, did we really, really, really explain this? And then I'll add in some pictures, because I can tell you from going through Amazon data that Amazon is like, yeah, put up 40 pictures, go for it. People don't look at them. All the dwell time is in reading the descriptions. All of the dwell time is in ratings and reviews and question and answer. Nobody looked at your 3rd image, much less your 10th image, much less the sizzle video you put up. And I think that is a very difficult thing to hear from a branding perspective, because it matters so much in store.
Sure.
Like seeing and like sensorially tactile experience of the product. And obviously you want your branding to feel good, and usually beauty or cool or like a visual environment is important to a lot of brands. And that's true. You just need to remember that it's important to your brand. So like what's important to customers is information.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the key, right? It's like, how do you align what you're doing as a brand around what your customers want, not what you want, because that's who you're selling to.
Right. And, still keeping your brand equity in place, because not every product is meant for every person. And so you don't want to go to common denominator. Like the ChatGPT conversation I always find interesting, because it's generative from the median of the mean. So it's already the most mediocre thing it could ever be. And that's, unless it's water, that's not how your customers are going to be segmented. So you don't want it to be the most average possible thing. You do want it to be specific to your customer. We just need to make sure that we're keeping the customer in mind while we're doing that.
Yeah. So anti-ChatGPT, did I catch that?
You did catch
really?
That. Yeah.
Strongly.
Later.
Yeah. No, I see your point though. I would say that it is very vanilla in a lot of its responses and answers. It has to be. Exactly. It can't take a strong stance. Whereas I think that's one thing that is unique to the human experience is we are allowed to have absolutely polarizing and wrong views about things. And that's part of what allows us to be able to say that stuff within, your PDP. And it's like, you can say that this is absolutely the best, most amazing, whatever glorious thing that some of the stuff that Liquid Death says, for instance, are you familiar with the Liquid Death brand for water? Like ChatGPT is likely not going to write that most of the time. I haven't tried to write anything in that format, but I can't imagine that it would come out with something that strong. It's going to be a watered down version of it, pun intended. Actually, it wasn't, but I'm going to own it anyways.
It was a good pun. Solid delivery. Yeah, I mean, a ChatGPT, generative anything is useful for bureaucracy. Write me a standard form. Wonderful. Just saved you a bunch of hours and thousands of dollars. That's great. So I'm not against the idea of it. I'm against the notion that you're going to create art with it. No, you're not.
Sure.
That you're going to write copy. You're going to speak well to a customer. You are literally not. And the reason is that you couldn't possibly be. And part of it is how bad most websites are, because that's what it's learning from. So as it's scraping your website that has one word on it that's pow, but it's a soda company. No, it doesn't have access to good soda copy to give you, again, the median version of whatever it would be. So one is the intake is bad, but two is that it is written to be an average of averages. So it's not ever going to be great. It's not ever going to speak to your individual thing. Might it speed it up a little bit? Might you be able to get, I see a lot of people will be well, you can get top 10 lists. You can get BuzzFeed style stuff. And yeah, sure. If that's a use case for you, awesome. Please don't put that on your website.
Unless that's your brand. If that already is your brand, sure, right? But if that's not your brand, maybe you're pushing it. I don't know. I can still, here's the thing, coming from the ad side, and so this is where we maybe have a little bit of that dueling forces that I appreciate. What converts sometimes is the absolute most atrocious, ugly thing that you've ever experienced. And it has that immediate connection to purchases. That doesn't necessarily mean that it builds up the brand. And that's where I'd say that there is a duality that needs to be played there as far as what builds the brand equity versus what gets results right now. And there is a difference, but from a strictly what's going to get the results right now, sometimes it is the ugliest thing. I want to say there was I forget who did it, but they basically made a banner ad a long time ago where it was just a hand-drawn thing that they drew up, made it look like a banner ad, drew a button on it or whatever. And it was not even, this isn't even designed anything, but because it stuck out so much from every other banner ad that people were seeing, it had the effect that it needed to have.
Yeah, wholeheartedly with you there. I think that is true and that is fair. I will also say, though, doing things like that opens a can of worms where every brand is now we should do a hand-drawn ad. And you're no. It's not it wasn't a secret trick. They did it and it was surprising. Surprise is the trick, or authenticity is the trick. But no, you don't need to all do UGC.
Right. Hand-drawn ads are not the new form of advertising that needs to take place. It was because it stood out. That's the only reason why it worked. And as soon as everybody does it, and to your point, that's why a lot of these hacks just don't work for a very long time. But usually by the time you've heard about it, it's been written about or something like that on, Entrepreneur or something. It's past its prime, and you need to move on from that and start focusing on going back to, again, have the basics, run some of those tests, those hacks. It's fine, but have the basics done first. If you're running the hacks, but you haven't even done the basics, maybe start there, build the foundation.
Yeah. And hacks are a Ponzi scheme. Hacks are like an MLM. If you were the first one in, good for you. If you were anybody after the third one doing it,
Right.
It's not going to go anywhere. And that's going to be frustrating, right? Like that, I
Right.
think circles back to the beginning of like, it's emotionally draining and it's hard. Like you are working so hard. And I think sometimes like when you talk about like, we'll just do it right. That's exhausting to someone who's like, I have done all 600 of the things I was supposed to do and it didn't move any needles for me. And I'm getting yelled at by my boss. And like, my personal money is in this company and like, it's not going anywhere. And like, I have no way now to separate like wheat from chaff. If everybody said they did this thing, then like, that's the right answer. Right. And like, that is fundamentally wrong. And that's fundamentally what is like driving people into the ground. And like, at that point, with that amount of stress, like you don't have the distance to be able to be like, oh no, this one isn't good for me. And like, I think it's tough. Like a lot of my messaging is really like brands need to do better, but also recognizing that like brands are under a ton of pressure already. Yes. And like, it's not a great environment in which to firmly take a stand and calmly take 3 steps back and like turn off all your media for a minute until you figure out what you should be doing. Like, oh, that's terrifying sounding. And I completely understand that. I've been at big companies. I fully get what it's like.
And that's where somebody like you comes in and says, okay, yeah, there are these 6,000 things that you need to do, but I am a pattern recognizer. And so I can tell you, these are the 6 that you need to start with first is kind of like what you're doing. You're helping them to navigate the 6,000 things that everybody else is saying, you're saying, but from a pattern recognition standpoint, start here.
Yeah. From like a prioritization, right? Yep. Like fixing your site speed is going to triple your traffic. Changing the color of your banner may or may not do anything. It's not that it's bad. It's that there are things that will give you real gains and will really help you. And there are things that won't. And I think, like with anything in life, we're like, well, changing the banner color takes 15 seconds. Like compressing all the extra Java on our site will take 3 weeks.
Sure.
I want to do the one today. And you're like, I hear you barking. It's just not going to work. And you're going to be even more stressed out.
Right.
Right. So like take a step back.
We do focus so much on the immediate things. Well, what can I do today? Right. That we seem to have a lack of the ability to be patient and say, but this one's going to take 3 weeks, but this is the one that's going to have the impact. This is something that you seem passionate about just in general. And I love this, right? Like there's not like a gray answer here. You're like, no, it is this or it's this. It's like moving on. Why? What makes you tick? Why are you able to be so sure of where you're going with your answers? Like, what is it about that? Something that like, from your childhood or something like a mentor, or, what? Yeah.
Yeah. Fair question. I mean, the real answer is the TISM.
Sure.
It's how the brain works. I think outside of that though, and especially from the past, I came up in a corporate environment and I came up in the, like the early aughts where like being nice and like playing the game was really important. And I had one boss early on who, when I was being like very kind in a board meeting, was like, I pay you have an opinion. Like, tell me what the correct answer is. And it really shifted the way I approach things into being like, if I do objectively know the correct answer, because some things are objective, some things are subjective, and it's hard to take the firmest stance in subjectivity because, different strokes for different folks. But objectively, and most of my work is objective, like there is a correct answer. Doesn't make any sense to pussyfoot around the math being wrong. If it's wrong, it's wrong. That doesn't make you stupid. It just means the math is wrong. But I really credit that particular boss at that time for being more forthright in the information he was seeking.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you said, like, if the math is wrong, it's wrong. That's one of my favorite things about math. And that's why I have such a high affinity towards math as well, because math literally just says that you're like, this is what it means. There is, it doesn't matter, you can look at it a million other ways. You could say that it's from a different perspective or whatever, but you're simply saying, but it's like, but here's the thing, 3 + 4 still equals 7. And there's a comfort in knowing that there's like this stability in how math works. And it's taken us, let's say, millennia to get to the point where we've established a lot of the rules of math to that. And there's still some things that upset us. I will say on that topic, very tangential. I remember the first time learning that 4.9 repeating equals 5. It's not approaching 5. It's not the limit of 5. It is the same thing as saying 5. It is identical. It is 100% equal. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel right. It feels very not intuitive. And I can remember the first time I found that, like, just spending probably a couple months trying to disprove something that's been proven. I think like there are 3 different proofs that prove this now, right? And so it's like, we're very sure of this in the math community, but it feels so much against what I would like to think.
Yeah, but I think that's amazing. Also, I really enjoy that. I don't know if we said this on this or not, but I find like musicians have a high affinity for math, and I love that that's like a brain connector thing, which is rad. But I took theoretical calculus in college, which sounds much harder than it is. And I remember the professor just being like, the numbers don't matter. Like, we made them up. They're just squiggles. So like, I need you to be able to understand like what addition means. And watching people were crying. Like, this was a rocky class. And when it finally sinks in and you're just like, oh, like A plus B equals A plus B. And like the numbers are signifiers that we all agreed upon, but like technically it's just because we all agreed upon them kind of thing. So like, are we biggering? Are we smallering? Are we doing that at scale? Are we doing it not at scale? Which I find really, really interesting. And you're right. It's really like soothing. It's very relaxing. The like, and you know, there's definitely arguments being made that like you can't only use data because you can make terrible decisions with data, which is true. Like you do need to have context to it. But there is an element of like, but you got to do the math first. We can't just be making it up. Like check the math first and then using that math, use your context or your background or whatever, or your goals, because maybe your goals aren't more traffic. Maybe they aren't more sales, which is possible.
Yep.
And kind of applying it that way. But yeah, the math is very relaxing.
Well, and to make better decisions with data, you know, I think about it's like, okay, how can we do this in one fell swoop? And one of the ways that we could do that is rather than looking at such granular data points, sometimes it's like you have to step back. And I see this with brands all the time where they're like, oh, well, you know, we were up this week, down this week, up this. And I think I'm going the wrong direction here for you. Here we'll go, you know, this way now. But it's like up this week, down this week, up this week, down this, up these. Okay, wait. But pull back in a little bit of a larger window, and what you really were up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and you're actually approaching higher than where you were if you look at it, you know, 8 weeks from now. So it might feel like you're just going up and down and up and down and up and down, and you're not making any momentum, but you are when you pull back and you see that over a broader window. And I think that that's something that people miss oftentimes with the data, where they're looking so closely at this, and it reminds me of the gorilla video. Do you ever remember this video that was really popular for a while, where they're passing basketballs back and forth, and they say, okay, count how many times the basketball is passed between the team wearing the white shirts, and you watch and you count and you're like, 15, I got it, right? And they say, you know, they say the answer and they're like, it was 15. And you're like, yeah, I'm so smart. And then they're like, did you see the gorilla? And you're like, what gorilla? There's a gorilla that walks right through the middle of the video while you're doing this and you're watching, and you like literally don't see the gorilla at all. But I think that we do that with data, and that's to your point where it's like, you know, you got to do the math. You can make bad decisions on data, but you actually got to be able to kind of look at this a little bit more holistically as well.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. I have not seen that video, but that is a phenomenal story. And you're right. You get so hyper focused on this one thing that you miss like the forest for the trees, and you're like, yeah, I mean, that stinks. And I will say that like I have this conversation with too many brands where I'll be like, yeah, you just need to do X and then Y.
Sure.
Which are simple and not easy, which is fair. But the response 100% of the time is a version of like, if it were that easy, I would have already done it. And you're like, well, you didn't, and it is. So
sure.
Let's try that one. Because I mean, again, you're running a company. Like you're incredibly busy with a billion different things. So the fact that you ticked the wrong box does not need to be like an emotional failure.
Sure.
Like, all right, now let's tick the right one.
Yeah. Don't continue making bad decisions just because you made one bad. And I'll say that we all get into this habit where you're just like, well, I missed my workout on Monday, so this week's done. I'm just going to start over next week. And wait, no, you still work out Tuesday through Sunday though too. Don't give up on the entire workout just because you missed the one workout. But we do that where, well, that didn't work out the way I ticked the wrong box or whatever. So I'm just going to continue ticking more of the wrong boxes and say, oh, how about we just undo that and tick the right box? I like the way that you worded that.
Yeah.
What about throughout all of this, one of the things I know you and I talked about was finding serenity. So when you can see patterns the way that you see patterns, it can be difficult to turn your brain off a little bit as well and find that calmness. Well, what are some tips and tricks that you have implemented for finding serenity?
Finding serenity. I think probably the first one, well, the actual first one is that I moved out of a major city. So that's not necessarily possible for everybody, but
sure.
Being overstimulated all the time was not great for the brain. So moving out of a major city. And I think then tangential to that, I go for like walks every morning in the garden, and it's just a very like hard physical reset to the central nervous system. And that truthfully is one of those things that sort of sounds like made up until you do it. And it really is the most like calming, relaxing, centering, grounding thing, like 5 minutes or an hour. Like it's just a very...
Do you do it barefoot, like truly grounding?
Sometimes. So I'm in an apartment complex, so it's
Okay.
gravel, which is not the most pleasant thing. But in the spring, it's
Hot coals.
yeah, we're gonna do this for real. So sometimes there are like little grassy knolls that I'll do it on. But I find that I'll like dig my hands all the way into like the dirt of the garden beds, and that it's an immediate, very like fundamental shift. Like it is
Sure.
very much impacting like your heart rate and your pupil dilation and like the way that you're absorbing like wavelengths of light, which I just find fascinating. All that stuff is
Yeah.
fascinating.
So I'm with you 100%. I think that a lot of those things that we think are science fiction, or let's say, hippy dippy or whatever we want to call it, right?
Right.
I think that there's actually a lot more science there that we just haven't caught up to. And to your point, the wavelengths of light from the sky, the wavelengths of light from plants that we have, let's just say, for thousands of years, we have been surrounded by that. We have, I would even say that they are emitting sounds that we may not necessarily immediately perceive, but those sound waves ourselves may be perceiving some of the things that those things are saying, right? And even getting down to the idea of light and sound, all of those have an effect on our bodies that we don't recognize. And I think that science will eventually catch up to that, and there is something to that. So I'm right there with you on that.
I think science has a little bit, like, the long running joke of like Victorian ladies being hysterical and being like sent to the sea, and that the sound of ocean and salt in the air and seeing the color blue,
Sure.
particularly like undulating blue, has a very profound effect on your central nervous system. So I think we probably like reflexively do things that are good for us. And you're right, like maybe we think it's silly, maybe it sounds like a little hippie-ish or like foolish. It really is a very big impact. And truthfully, I think like you got to do you. Like if your day is better and everyone collectively does that, then collectively the society is going to be better. And I think like you're welcome to make fun of me for walking around barefoot in my garden, even if it's on hot coals, if it's going to be, like making me better. Right. Like I think we sort of missed that in the in-group thinks we're dumb. Like, okay.
Sure. Well,
That's
and
fine.
again, because I'm 100% with you. Even let's just say taking ice baths. For a long time, it was just like, oh, that's not necessarily a thing. And now we actually know that there's a cold shock protein that gets released that goes through and repairs so many things within your body. And it's like, eventually, I do think that we will come to have a better scientific understanding of how all of these different things, walking barefoot in your garden, we'll get definitive scientific research that says, yeah, here's why. We actually get it. And it's a wonderful thing for you. And you should have been doing what your grandma told you to do. Back to the grandma test.
Oh my God. The grandma rules. That's so good. Also, a cold plunge, man. Those are so good. But you have to get your vagus nerve under. And I feel like a lot of them, people dip to like their chest and they're like huffing and they look miserable. And you're like, it doesn't hurt if you get the back of your neck in, which is such a like funny hack. Like it doesn't hurt. You don't feel weird. You don't feel too cold. You don't shiver. It doesn't. I mean, you probably shiver a little bit. The vagus nerve is like the thing you're supposed to be making cold. And that's in the back of your neck. So like if you're going to do a cold plunge, you got to get like chin deep.
Sure. Just go all in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
What about any quirks or hobbies? One of the things you were talking to me was getting deep into your mind palace. And that's something that I appreciate as well. Tell me a little bit about like your mind palace.
I think the idea of creating like an orderly universe in my head is a really relaxing, and also I've never tried to like verbalize this before. It's really relaxing practice, but it's also like where all the secrets are.
Sure.
That like, if you can like if I can shut out kind of like sound, light, things that are around me and like go into my brain, like that's where I keep all the math. That's where I'll keep all the stored information. Yeah. That's where I keep all of like the extra data. And I think that it's, like you create your own. So like having this like calm, quiet, clean environment for me where I can like see where the numbers are going or where the patterns are going is the easiest and again, like most relaxing way to do it. And I would imagine, I mean, you said you love them too, so I'm super curious what yours is like.
Well, so I got into it because there's a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, and it's absolutely a fun book. And he goes into the author, and I'm drawing a blank on his name for right now, but he goes into just even setting this up for memory competitions where, I memorized pi out to 59 digits on my way to work one time, but it just sheer rote, right? And it's just, okay, heard it. And it was like, great, got it. But when you want to go to like 80,000 digits, which some people have done, like they've got a massive amounts of digits, the only way you can do that is with a mind palace. And so he talks about how it's like you set up like a person, an action, and an object. And so it's like you do that for each double digit, and then you set up these approaches. And so I had done this for a while, but you can set up then so that you could put like this weird person, action, and object around the different parts of your house. So you come in, you walk in through the door of your mind palace, and you say, great, I'm putting this one here, and I'm putting this one here. And because they're so crazy, it becomes much easier to recall, but you can now end up with, and I'm maybe going a little fast, you can end up with 6 digits. So let's say you have a person, an action, and an object for, let's say 1-1. And maybe I say that this is moonwalking with Einstein. So it's like you're like Einstein moonwalking on wood or something, right? So it's like, okay, I've got my person, my action, and my object. And then let's say for 2-2, let's say that this is Katharine McKee singing into a microphone, right? And so it's like, okay, that's 2-2. And then let's say for 3-3, it's just for fun, it's William dancing. William dancing on I don't know, on the sun. So you're like, okay, you've got that. Well, you could combine all 6 of those into one image then, where you could say, okay, if it's 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, then it would be Einstein. So it's the first person. So it's Einstein, 2-2. So it would be the verb from yours. So, and what was our verb for you that we used? Singing. So Einstein singing. And then 3-3 was mine, and the object was the sun. So it's Einstein singing on the sun. So then you can put that now. So it's like, oh, that's an interesting thing. And I walk in and I go to my left here and I put Einstein singing on the sun right there. And I can recognize it's Einstein 1-1 singing is 2-2 and sun is 3-3. So I know that it's 1-1, 2-2, 3-3. So I've got 6 digits in this one little thing. And now you go around the rest of your palace and you put these things here and you can memorize very, very massive amounts of numbers.
Oh my God, that's rad. I'd actually never heard it described that way.
It's that's really awesome. Cool thing. Yeah. So anyway, so when you talked about your mind palace, I was like, ooh, this is fun. And I think we should talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing. What's the book? Moonwalking with Einstein?
Moonwalking with Einstein. Now, coming up towards the end of this, I also like asking people about any, silly human tricks or something like that. Is there any kind of a silly human trick that you do that you're like, oh, most people don't do this, or most people can't do this?
I don't know if it's most. I will say that I whistle with my throat, not my lips, and that tends to throw people off. Like
tube and throat singing? Like, what do you mean?
How do you I don't know what that is. So maybe, and it's like here, but you don't. Okay. I don't like. It's like
what?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not even your lips aren't pursed, right? It's not like
yeah.
So you're. That's so crazy. I don't know that I can't do that. I'm going to try. I know I can't. I have absolutely no clue how you do it.
I feel like you can do it. I don't really know how I'm doing it. The motion is here.
I'm going to spit all over my camera.
I'm trying to think how am I doing it? Okay, so if you put this part of your tongue against the inside of your teeth, but you leave the tip loose and then blow from here.
I'm not doing it. It's not working for me.
I bet you can do it.
I think I'm trying, but it's not coming out. Nope. I can't do that. I will say, at least similarly, though, I can whistle and hum at the same time. Can you whistle and hum?
Oh, no.
So there's my thing that I could do.
I think you're doing the thing that I'm doing, but you're just pursing your lips. I think it's the same.
Maybe. I don't know. So I'm literally humming. It's like, and then I'm, pursing my lips. So it's.
Yeah, I think it is the same thing.
Oh.
Yeah, because if you hum here. Yeah, I think we are doing the same thing.
Well,
Rad.
I was not, whatever I was trying to do, when I was trying to do it like you, I was just spitting all over everything. I'm going to need to wipe this all down. Okay.
Fair.
So wrapping it up, what is, if you have one piece of advice for e-commerce brands, top piece of advice that you would say, hey, start doing this, please do this, don't do this. What is that number one piece of advice?
The first one for everybody is take your pop-ups down. They're dumb. The second one is take your chatbot down unless you're a doctor. And the third one is your hero section needs to have information in it. So one, I would take a look at the size of the image. I know you have an image there. I would take a look at the size of the image you have there and shrink it down. And you can do a next gen converter for anyone. If that sounds weird to anyone, you can do a next gen conversion from whatever the JPEG is into something light. But make sure you have information in there, like and not an embedded text file. It needs to be an actual standalone text box. So do not put it on top of the image. It needs to be standalone to be read, but put the information there. And the information is not your brand slogan. The information is why this is a good product for someone or a good service for someone. I think that's going to tick all the relevancy boxes. It's going to tick all the quality boxes, or a good number of the quality boxes that you're probably getting dinged on. And that will improve your traffic, which will also bring your CPCs down. You're welcome.
Yay. Okay. And if people want to connect with you, follow you, work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Ooh, a good question. I'm on LinkedIn, Katharine McKee. You can swing by our website, which is morphologyconsulting.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can hit me up on Twitter. You can find me on TikTok. They're not very good, but you can swing by.
Perfect. That helps. We've got lots of opportunities. We can connect with you in one fell swoop here. And I appreciate you coming out and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us here today.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. This is super fun.
Thanks, everyone, for joining in.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.